close even to the heart, but in finding it full and well surrounded by the strong walls of the knowledge of self, unable to find a place for themselves, they draw back, causing no damage to the soul. So, this is what you must be careful about. Taking the praises and scorns of creatures into no account. April 26, 1899. Souls who are detached. Luisa prays for the healing of a speech defect of her confessor. Today, while my loving Jesus was making himself seen, it seemed to me that he was sending me many flashes of light which penetrated through all of me, when, in one instant, I found myself outside of myself together with him, and the confessor was there. Immediately I prayed my beloved Jesus to give a kiss to the confessor, and to go into his arms for a little while. Jesus was a child. To make me content, immediately he kissed the confessor on his face, but without wanting to detach from me. I remained all afflicted, and I said to him, "My little treasure, my intention was for you to kiss, not his face, but his mouth, so that, touched by your most pure lips, it might be sanctified and strengthened from that weakness. In this way, it will be able to announce your holy word more freely, and to sanctify others. Oh, please, I pray you to make me content." So, Jesus gave him another kiss on his mouth, and then he said, "I am so very pleased with the souls who are detached from everything, not only in the affect, but also in the effect, that as they keep stripping themselves, my light keeps investing them, and they become just like crystals, such that the light of the sun finds no impediment to penetrate inside of them, unlike buildings and other material things." Then he added, "Ah, they think that they strip themselves, but instead, they come to be clothed not only with spiritual things, but also with corporal ones, because my providence has a care, all particular and special, for these detached souls. My providence covers them everywhere. It happens that they have nothing, but they possess everything." After this, we withdrew from the confessor, and we found many religious people who seemed all to have their goals set on working for their interest. Passing through their midst, Jesus said, "Woe, woe to one who works for the purpose of gaining money. You have already received your recompense." May 2, 1899. How all heaven is veiled in the church. This morning, Jesus aroused much compassion. He was so afflicted and in suffering that I would not dare to ask him any question. We would look at each other in silence. Every now and then he would give me a kiss, and I would kiss him. And he continued to make himself seen in this way several times. On the last time he made me see the church, telling me these exact words: "All heaven is veiled in my church. Just as in heaven one is the head, which is God, and many are the saints, of different conditions, orders and merits, so in my church, in which all heaven is veiled, one is the head, which is the Pope, and the sacrosanct Trinity is veiled even in the triple tiara that covers his head. And many are the members that depend on this head, that is, different dignities, various orders, superior and inferior, from the littlest to the greatest, they all serve to embellish my church. Each one, according to its degree, has the office entrusted to it, and by the exact fulfillment of the virtues it comes to give from itself a splendor so very fragrant to my church, that the earth and heaven are perfumed and illuminated, and the people are so drawn by this light and by this fragrance, that it is almost impossible for them not to surrender to the truth. I leave it to you, then, to consider those infected members which, instead of shedding light, cast darkness. How much torment they cause in my church. While Jesus was saying this, I saw the confessor near him. Jesus stared at him with his penetrating gaze. Then he turned to me and told me, I want you to have full confidence in the confessor, even in the smallest things. So much so, that there must be no difference for you between me and him, and according to your confidence and faith in his words, so I will concur. In the very act in which Jesus was saying these words, I remembered about certain temptations of the devil which had produced a little bit of distrust in me. But Jesus, with his vigilant eye, immediately corrected me, and at that very moment I felt that distrust being removed from within my interior. May the Lord be always blessed, who has so much care for this soul, so miserable and sinful. May 6, 1899. Luisa looks for Jesus amid the angels. This morning, Jesus hardly made himself seen. I was feeling my mind so confused, that I almost could not understand the loss of Jesus, when I felt surrounded by many spirits. Maybe they were angels, I cannot tell with certainty. While I was in their midst, every now and then I would investigate. Who knows, I might feel at least the breath of my beloved. But as much as I did, I found nothing that would reveal the presence of my loving good. Then, all of a sudden, I felt a sweet breath coming from behind my shoulders, and immediately I cried out, Jesus, my Lord. He answered, Luisa, what do you want? Jesus, my beautiful one, come, do not remain behind my shoulders, for I cannot see you. I have been waiting for you and investigating for the whole morning. Who knows, I might see you amid these angelic spirits that surrounded my bed. But I could not, therefore I feel very tired, because I can find no rest without you. Come, for we will rest together. So Jesus placed himself near me, and sustained my head. Those spirits said, Lord, how quickly she recognized you. Not even at your voice, but at your mere breath, immediately she called you. Jesus answered them, She knows me, and I know her. She is so very dear to me, like the pupil of my eyes. And while he was saying this, I found myself in the eyes of Jesus. Who can say what I felt, being in those most pure eyes? It is impossible to manifest it with words. The very angels remained astonished. May 7, 1899. Purity of intention in operating. While I was doing my meditation during the day, Jesus kept making himself seen near me, and told me, my person is surrounded by all the works that souls do, as by a garment. And the more purity of intention and intensity of love they have, the more splendor they give me, and I will give them more glory. So much so, that on the day of judgment I will show them to the whole world, to let the whole world know how my children have honored me, and how I honor them." Assuming a more afflicted air, he added, "My daughter, what will happen to so many works, even good, done without purity of intention, out of habit and self-interest? What shame will not fall upon them on the day of judgment, in seeing so many works, good in themselves, but made rotten by their intention, such that their very actions, instead of rendering honor to them, as they would to many others, will give them shame. In fact, I do not look at the greatness of the works, but at the intention with which they are done. Here is all my attention." Jesus kept silent for a little while, and I kept thinking about the words he had spoken to me while I was meditating within my mind, especially on the purity of intention, and on the fact that, when creatures do good, they must disappear, making the creature one with the Lord himself, as if creatures did not exist. Then Jesus continued, saying to me, "Yet, it is so. See, my heart is so very large, but the door is very narrow. No one can fill the void of this heart but souls who are detached, naked and simple. In fact, as you see, since the door is small, any hindrance, even the slightest, that is, a shadow of attachment, an intention which is not upright, a work done without the purpose of pleasing me, prevents them from entering to delight in my heart. Much love of neighbor enters my heart, but it must be so united to mine as to form one single love, in such a way that one cannot be distinguished from the other. But as for the other love of neighbor which is not transformed into my love, I do not look at it as something that belongs to me." May 9, 1899. Threat of chastisements. Jesus gives his bitter breath to Luisa. This morning I was in a sea of affliction because of the loss of Jesus. After much hardship, Jesus came and drew so close to me, that I could not even see him. He reached the point of placing his forehead upon mine, of leaning his face on mine, and so with all the other members. Now, while Jesus was in this position, I said to him, "My adorable Jesus, you don't love me anymore." And he, "If I did not love you, I would not be so close to you." And I added, "How can you say that you love me if you no longer let me suffer as before? I am afraid you don't want me to be in this state any more. At least, free me also from the bother of the confessor." While I was saying this, it seemed that Jesus would not pay attention to my words, but rather, he made me see a multitude of people, who were committing every kind of evil. Indignant with them, Jesus would make different kinds of contagious diseases swoop down into their midst, and many would die black as charcoal. It seemed that Jesus would exterminate that multitude of people from the face of the earth. While seeing this, I prayed Jesus to pour his bitternesses into me, so as to spare the people, but he would not pay attention to me in this either. And replying to the words I had said before, he added, "The greatest chastisement I can give you, the priest, and the people, is to free you from this state of suffering. My justice would pour out in all of its fury, because it would find no opposition. This is so true, that the worst evil for someone is to be given an office and then to be removed from it. It would be better for him had he not been admitted to that office, since, by abusing it and not profiting from it, he has rendered himself unworthy of it. Then, Jesus continued to come quite a few times today, but so afflicted as to move one to pity and to tears, maybe even the stones. I tried to console him as much as I could. Now I would embrace him. Now I would sustain his head which was in great pain. Now I would say to him, "Heart of my heart, Jesus, it has never been your usual way to appear so afflicted to me. If other times you made yourself seen afflicted, by pouring it into me, you would immediately change appearance. But now I am being denied the opportunity to give you this relief. Who would have thought, after you have consented to pour and to share your sufferings with me for so long, and you yourself did so much to dispose me, that now I would have to be deprived of it? Suffering for love of you was my only relief. It was suffering that made me bear my exile from heaven. But now, being deprived of it, I feel I have no place on which to lean any more, and life becomes tedious to me. Oh, please. Oh, holy spouse, beloved good, my dear life, oh, please. Let the pains come back to me, give me suffering. Do not look at my unworthiness and at my grave sins, but at your mercy, which has not exhausted itself. While I was pouring myself out with Jesus, he drew closer to me and told me, "My daughter, it is my justice that wants to pour itself out over the creatures. The number of sins in men is almost complete, and justice wants to come out, to make pomp of its fury, and to find reparation for the injustices of men. Look, to show you how embittered I am and to content you a little bit, I want to pour only my breath into you." And so, drawing his lips near mine, he sent me his breath, which was so bitter that I felt my mouth, my heart and my whole person being intoxicated. If his mere breath was so bitter, what must be the rest of Jesus? He left me with such pain, that I felt my heart pierced through. May 12, 1899. Jesus makes her content, pouring sweetnesses and bitternesses from his side. This morning, continuing to make himself seen afflicted, my adorable Jesus transported me outside of myself, and showed me the various offenses he was receiving. I began to pray again that he would pour his bitternesses into me. At the beginning Jesus did not pay attention to me, and he just told me, "My daughter, only then is charity perfect when it is done for the sole purpose of pleasing me. And only then is it called true charity and is it recognized by me, when it is stripped of everything." Taking the occasion from his very words, I said to him, "Jesus, my dear, it is precisely for this that I want you to pour your bitternesses into me, to be able to relieve you from so many pains. And if I pray you also to spare the creatures, it is because I remember well that on other occasions, after you had chastised the creatures, in seeing them suffer so much from poverty and other things, you too suffered very much. On the other hand, when I have been attentive and I have prayed you and importuned you to the point of tiring you, so much so that you were pleased to pour it into me, sparing them. Afterwards you have been very content about it. Don't you remember? Besides, are they not your images? Seeing himself persuaded, Jesus told me, because of you, it is necessary to make you content. Draw near me and drink from my side. So I did. I drew near him to drink from his side, but instead of bitterness, I suckled a most sweet blood, which inebriated all of me with love and with sweetness. Yes, I was content, but this was not my intention. So, turning to him, I said, "My dear good, what are you doing? What comes out is not bitter, but sweet. Oh, please, I pray you, pour your own bitternesses into me." And Jesus, looking at me benignly, told me, "Keep drinking, for the bitter will come afterwards." So, I attached myself to his side again, and after the sweet kept coming for a while, the bitter also came. But who can say the intensity of the bitterness? After I was satiated from drinking, I got up, and looking at his head which had the crown of thorns, I removed it and I drove it onto my head. Jesus seemed to be all compliant, while other times he had not permitted this. How beautiful it was to see Jesus after he had poured his bitternesses. He seemed almost disarmed, without strength, but all meek, like a humble little lamb, all compliant. I realized that it was very late, but since the confessor had come early in the morning to call me to obedience, it wasn't that I knew that I was to be called by obedience, for at the obedience Jesus leaves me free. So, turning to him, I said, "Most sweet Jesus, do not allow that I cause trouble to my family and bother to the confessor by having him come again. Oh, please, I beg you, you yourself, let me return into myself." Jesus told me, "My daughter, today I do not want to leave you. And I too do not have the heart to leave you, but, just for a little while, to let my family see that I am inside myself, and then we will return to be together." So, after a long differing, saying goodbye to each other, he left me for a little while. It was precisely lunchtime, and my family was just coming to call me. But even though I felt I was inside myself, I felt all full of suffering, my head would not hold up. That bitter and that sweet which I had drunk from the side of Jesus gave me such satiety and suffering together, that it was impossible for me to take anything else. The word I had given to Jesus kept me on tenterhooks. So, with the pretext that my head was aching, I said to my family, "Let me be alone, for I don't want anything." So I was left free again, and immediately I began to call my sweet Jesus. And he, always benign, came back. But who can say what happened to me today? How many graces Jesus gave to my soul! How many things he made me understand! It is impossible to express it with words. Then, after staying for a long time, in order to calm my sufferings, Jesus poured sweet milk from his mouth, and then, around evening, he left me, giving me his word that he would come back soon. And so I found myself inside myself again, but a little bit more free of sufferings. May 16, 1899. The virtue of the cross. Stripping oneself of one's own will. Jesus continued for a few more days to manifest himself in the same way, not wanting to detach himself from me. It seemed that that little bit of sufferings he had poured into me attracted him so much, that he could not be without me. This morning he poured a little bit more of bitterness from his mouth into mine, and then he told me, "The cross disposes the soul to patience. The cross opens heaven, and unites heaven and earth together, that is, God and the soul. The virtue of the cross is powerful, and when it enters into a soul, it has the virtue of removing the rust of all earthly things. Not only this, but it causes her boredom, bother and contempt for the things of the earth, giving her, instead, the flavor and the enjoyment of celestial things. However, few are those who recognize the virtue of the cross. Therefore they despise it. Who can say how many things I understood about the cross while Jesus was speaking? The speaking of Jesus is not like ours, in which one understands only as much as is said. Rather, one single word leaves an immense light, and to ruminate well on it one could remain occupied the whole day in most profound meditation. Therefore, if I wanted to tell everything I would be too long, and I would also lack the time to do it. After a little while, Jesus came back again, but a little more afflicted. I immediately asked the reason for it, and Jesus showed me many devout souls, and told me, "My daughter, what I look at in the soul is when she strips herself of her will. Only then does my will invest her, divinize her, and make her all mine. Take a look at these souls who call themselves devout, as long as things go their way. But then, one little thing, if their confessions are not long enough, if the confessor does not satisfy them, is enough for them to lose peace. And some reach the point of no longer wanting to do anything. This says that it is not my will that predominates in them, but their own. Believe, O my daughter, that they have taken the wrong way, because when I see that they really want to love me, I have many ways to give my grace." How pitiful it was to see Jesus suffer for this kind of people. I tried to compassionate him as much as I could, and so it ended. May 19, 1899. Humility is the safeguard of the celestial favors. This morning I felt a fear within me that it might not be Jesus, but the devil, who wanted to deceive me. Jesus came, and seeing me with this fear, he said to me, "Humility is the safeguard of the celestial favors." Humility clothes the soul with such safety that the tricks of the devil cannot penetrate into her. Humility places all celestial graces in safety, so much so, that when I see humility, I let flow, abundantly, all kinds of celestial favors. Therefore, do not want to disturb yourself for this, but rather, with a simple eye, look always into your interior, to see whether you are invested with beautiful humility, and do not worry about all the rest. Then he showed me many religious people and, among them, priests, even of holy life. But as good as they were, They lacked that spirit of simplicity in believing in the many graces and the many ways the Lord uses with souls. Jesus said to me, I communicate myself both to the humble and to the simple, because they immediately believe in my graces and take them into great consideration, though they may be ignorant and poor. But with these others you see, I am very reluctant, because the first step which draws the soul near me is belief. And it happens that these, with all of their science and doctrine, and even holiness, never come to experience a ray of celestial light. That is, they walk along the natural way, and they never arrive at touching, even slightly, that which is supernatural. This is also the reason for which in the course of my mortal life there was not one learned, one priest, one man of power, among my followers, but all ignorant and of low condition, because these were more humble and simple, and also more disposed to make great sacrifices for me. May 23, 1899. Sweetness. Detachment from oneself. This time my adorable Jesus wanted to play a little bit. He would come, he would show he wanted to listen to me, but as I would begin to speak, he would disappear from me like a flash. Oh, God, what pain! While my heart was swimming in this most bitter pain of Jesus's distance, and it was also almost a little restless, Jesus came back again, telling me, "What is it? What is it? More peaceful, more calm. Speak, speak, what do you want?" But the moment I spoke, he disappeared. I did as much as I could to calm myself, but, no, after a while my heart returned to being unable to give itself peace, without its only and sole comfort. And maybe more than before. Coming back again, Jesus told me, "My daughter, sweetness has the virtue of making things change their nature. It knows well how to convert bitter into sweet. Therefore, more sweet, more sweet." But he gave me no time to say a word. This is how I spent the morning. After this, I felt I was outside of myself, together with Jesus. There were many people. Some aspired to riches, some to honor, some to glory, and some even to sanctity, and many other things, but not for God, but rather, to be considered someone by creatures. Turning to them, shaking his head, Jesus said, "Foolish you are working your own net to entangle yourselves." Then, turning to me, he told me, "My daughter, this is why the first thing I recommend is detachment from all things, and also from oneself. When the soul has detached herself from everything, she has no need to struggle in order to stay away from all the things of the earth which, by themselves, come around her. But rather, in seeing themselves ignored, and even more, despised, saying goodbye to her, they take leave of her to bother her no more." May 26, 1899. Contempt of oneself must be united to faith. This morning, I was in such a state of annihilation of myself, to the point of feeling obnoxious and annoyed. It seemed to me I was the most abominable being that could be found. I saw myself like a little worm that tossed and turned, but remained always there, in the mud, unable to take one step. Oh, God, what human misery! Yet, after I have been given so many graces, I am still so bad. My good Jesus, always benign with this miserable sinner, came and told me, contempt of yourself is praiseworthy when it is well invested with the spirit of faith. But when it is not invested with the spirit of faith, instead of doing you good, it can harm you. In fact, in seeing yourself as you are, unable to do anything good, you will be discouraged, disheartened, without daring to take one step on the path of good. But by leaning on me, that is, by investing yourself with the spirit of faith, you will come to know and despise yourself, and at the same time, to know me, confident of being able to do anything with my help. And here is how, by acting in this way, you will walk according to the truth. How much good these words of Jesus have done to my soul! I understood that I must enter into my nothingness and know who I am, but I must not stop there. Rather, immediately after I have known myself, I must fly into the immense sea of God, and stop there, to draw all the graces that my soul needs. Otherwise, nature becomes weary and the devil will look for means in order to cast it into discouragement. May the Lord be always blessed, and may everything be for His glory. May 31st, 1899. Opposition serves so that the truth may shine more in its own time. This morning, as I was in my usual state, my adorable Jesus came, and at that very moment I saw the confessor. Jesus appeared a little disappointed with him, because it seemed that the confessor wanted everyone to approve that my situation was a work from God, and almost wanted to convince other priests by showing them something of my interior. Jesus turned to the confessor and said to him, "This is impossible. Even I received oppositions, and from people among the most distinguished, and also from priests and other authorities. They found fault with my holy works, to the point of saying that I was possessed by the devil. But I allow these oppositions, even from religious people, so that the truth may shine more in its own time. If you want to consult with 2 or 3 priests among the most good and holy, and also learned, in order to receive enlightenment and also to do what I want in the things to be done, which is advice from the good and prayer, this I allow. But the rest, no, no. It would be as though wanting to waste my works, making fun of them, which displeases me very much." Then he said to me, "All I want from you is an upright and simple operating. Do not bother about the pros and the cons of creatures. Let them think what they want, without being the least troubled, since wanting that all be favorable is wanting to deviate from the imitation of my own life." June 2, 1899. The greatest favor that can be done for a soul is to make her know herself. This morning, my most sweet Jesus wanted to let me touch my nothingness with my own hands. In the act in which he made himself seen, the first words with which he addressed me were, "Who am I, and who are you?" In these 2 words I saw 2 immense lights. In one I comprehended God, in the other I saw my misery, my nothingness. I saw I was nothing but a shadow, just like the shadow formed by the sun in illuminating the earth. It is dependent on the sun, and as the sun moves from it to other places, the shadow ceases to exist outside of its splendor. The same for my shadow, that is, my being. It is dependent on the mystical sun god, who can dissolve this shadow in one simple instant. What to say, then, about how I have deformed this shadow which the Lord has given me, which is not even my own? The mere thought of it was horrifying. It was stinking, putrid, all full of worms. Yet, in such a horrifying state I was forced to stand before a God so holy. Oh, how content I would have been, had I been allowed to hide in the darkest abysses. After this, Jesus told me, the greatest favor I can do for a soul, is to make her know herself. The knowledge of self and the knowledge of God go together. The more you know yourself, the more you know God. When the soul has known herself, as she sees that she can do nothing good by herself, her shadow, her being, transforms her in God, and it happens that she does all of her operations in God. It happens that the soul is in God and walks beside Him, without looking, without investigating, without speaking, in a word, as if she were dead. In fact, knowing the depth of her nothingness, she dares to do nothing by herself, but she blindly follows the trajectory of the operations of God. It seems to me that to a soul who knows herself it happens as to those people who travel in a steamer. In moving from one point to another, without taking a step of their own, they make long journeys, but everything by virtue of the steamer that transports them. In the same way, the soul, by placing herself in God, just like the people in a steamer, makes sublime flights on the way to perfection, knowing, however, that it is not her, but rather, she does it by virtue of that blessed God who carries her within Himself. Oh, how the Lord favors her, enriches her, and concedes the greatest graces, knowing that she attributes nothing to herself, but everything to Him. Oh, soul, you who know yourself, how fortunate you are. June 3, 1899. Jesus pours His bitternesses. This morning, I was in a sea of affliction, for Jesus had not yet come. I felt such pain that I felt my heart being ripped out. When the confessor came to call me to obedience, for he had to celebrate Holy Mass, Jesus did not let even a shadow of himself be seen, as he usually does. In fact, when he does not come, he allows his hand, or his arm to be seen. And especially on a day in which I receive communion, as this morning, he himself comes, he purifies me, and prepares me to receive him in the sacrament. I was saying to myself, Holy Spouse, lovable Jesus, how is this? Aren't you coming to prepare me yourself? How can I receive you? But meanwhile, the time came, the confessor came, but Jesus did not come at all. What a harrowing pain, how many bitter tears. The confessor told me, you will see him at communion, and out of obedience you will ask him why he does not come and what he wants from you. So, after communion I saw my good Jesus, always benign with this miserable sinner. He transported me outside of myself, and I was holding him in my arms. He was a child, all afflicted. Immediately I began to say, "My little child, my sole and only good, how is it that you do not come? In what have I offended you? What do you want from me that you make me cry so much?" And in the act of saying this, my pain was so great, that even though I was holding him in my arms, I kept crying. But even before I finished speaking the last word, drawing his mouth close to mine, Jesus poured his bitternesses, without answering a word. When he would stop pouring, I would begin speaking again, but Jesus would not pay attention to me, and would begin to pour again. After this, without answering anything of what I wanted, he told me, "Let me pour into you, otherwise, just as I have destroyed other places with the hail, I will destroy your area. Therefore, let me pour, and do not think about anything else." He told me nothing else, and so it ended. June 5, 1899. Her miserable state. The health of the confessor. My state of annihilation still continues. It was such that I did not dare to say a word to my beloved Jesus. But this morning, having compassion for my miserable state, Jesus himself wanted to cheer me. And here is how. As he made himself seen, and I felt all annihilated and ashamed before him, Jesus drew near me, but so close, that it seemed that he was in me and I in him. And he told me, "My beloved daughter, what is it that makes you so afflicted? Tell me everything, for I will content you, and will remedy everything." Since I continued to see myself the way I described the other day, in seeing myself so bad, I did not dare to tell him anything. But Jesus repeated, "Come, come, tell me what you want, do not hesitate." Seeing myself almost forced, bursting into flooding tears, I said to him, "Holy Jesus, how do you want me not to be afflicted? After so many graces, I shouldn't be so bad anymore." Sometimes, also in the good works I try to do, I mix so many defects and imperfections, that I myself feel horror. What must they be before you, who are so perfect and holy? And then, the suffering, so very scarce compared to before, your long delays in coming, everything tells me in clear notes that my sins, my awful ingratitudes, are the cause of it, and that you, indignant with me, deny me even that daily bread which you usually concede to everyone, which is the cross. So, you will end up abandoning me completely. Can there be a greater affliction than this? Jesus, all compassion for me, pressed me to his heart and told me, "Do not fear, this morning we will do things together. In this way I will make up for your things." So, first it seemed that Jesus contained a fount of water and another of blood within his breast, and in those two fountains he plunged my soul, first in the water, and then in the blood. Who can say how purified and embellished my soul became? Then, we began to pray together, reciting 3 Glory Bees, and he told me that he was doing this to make up for my prayers and adorations to the majesty of God. Oh, how beautiful and touching it was to pray together with Jesus. After this, Jesus told me, "Don't let yourself be afflicted by the lack of suffering. Do you want to anticipate the hour established by me? My operating is not hurried, but everything has its time. We will fulfill everything, but at the appropriate time. Then, afterwards, because of a fully providential circumstance, unexpectedly, since the viaticum had come out of the church for other sick people, I too received communion." Who can say, after all that had passed between Jesus and me, the kisses and the caresses that Jesus gave me? It is impossible to say everything. After communion, I seemed to see the sacred host, and in the host I could see, now the mouth of Jesus, now his eyes, now one hand, and then he showed all of himself. He transported me outside of myself, and I found myself, now in the vault of the heavens, now on earth in the midst of people, but always together with Jesus. Every once in a while he would repeat, "Oh, how beautiful you are, my beloved. If you knew how much I love you, and you, how much do you love me?" On hearing these words being spoken to me, I experienced such confusion that I felt I was dying. But in spite of this, I had the courage to say to him, "Jesus, my beautiful one, yes, I love you very much. And you, if you really love me, tell me also, do you forgive me for all the evil I have done? But concede also suffering to me." And Jesus, "Yes, I forgive you, and I want to content you by pouring in abundance my bitternesses into you." And so Jesus poured his bitternesses. It seemed to me that he had a fount of bitternesses in his heart, received through the offenses of men, and most of it he poured into me. Then Jesus told me, "Tell me, what else do you want?" And I, "Holy Jesus, I commend to you my confessor. Make him a saint, and grant him also health for his body. But then, is it completely your will for this Father to come?" And Jesus, "Yes." And I, "If it were your will, you would let him be well." And he, "Be quiet, do not want to investigate my judgments too much." At that very moment he showed me the improvement in the health of the body, and the sanctity of the soul of the confessor, and he added, "You want to rush things, but I do everything at the right time." Then, I commended to him the people that belong to me, and I prayed for sinners, saying to Jesus, "Oh, how I wish that my body would split into tiny little pieces, provided that sinners would convert." So I kissed the forehead, the eyes, the face, the mouth of Jesus, doing various adorations and reparations for the offenses that sinners gave him. Oh, how content Jesus was, and I too. Then, having Jesus promise to me that he would not leave me any more, I returned to myself. And so it ended. June 8, 1899. Luisa wants everyone to convert. My adorable Jesus still continues to make himself seen all benignity and sweetness. This morning, while I was together with him, he repeated again, "Tell me, what do you want?" Immediately I said, "Jesus, my dear, what I would really want is that the whole world would convert." What a request out of proportion. But still, my loving Jesus told me, I would content you if all had the goodwill to be saved. And yet, to show you that I would gladly grant everything you have said, let us go together into the midst of the world, and all of those whom we will find with the goodwill to be saved, as evil as they may be, I will give to you. So we went out in the midst of people, to see who had the goodwill to be saved, but to our highest displeasure, we found a number so very scarce, that it is sorrowful just to think about it. In this number, so very scarce, there was my confessor, the majority of priests and part of the faithful, but not everyone from Piccaretta. Then he showed me the various offenses he was receiving. I prayed him to let me share in his sufferings, and Jesus poured his bitternesses from his mouth into mine. After this, he told me, my daughter, I feel my mouth too embittered. Oh, please, I beg you to sweeten it. I said to him, I would gladly give you anything, but I have nothing. You yourself, tell me, what can I give you? And he told me, let me suckle milk from your breasts, for in this way you will be able to sweeten me. And at the very moment he was saying this, he lay down in my arms and began to suckle. While he was doing this, a fear came to me that it might not be baby Jesus, but the devil. Therefore I placed my hand on his forehead and I signed him with the cross. Per signum crucis. Jesus looked at me all festive, and while still suckling, he smiled, and with his lively eyes he seemed to tell me, I am not a demon, I am not a demon. After he seemed to be satiated, he got up on my lap, and kissed me all over. Now, since I too felt my mouth bitter from the bitternesses he had poured into me, I felt like I wanted to suckle from the breasts of Jesus, but I did not dare to. But Jesus invited me to do it, and so I plucked up courage and I began to suckle. Oh, what sweetness of paradise came from that holy breast! But who can express it? Then I found myself inside myself, all inundated with sweetnesses and contentments. Now I will explain that, when it happens that Jesus suckles from my breasts, my body does not participate in this at all. Rather, it happens when I am outside of myself. It seems that this thing occurs only between the soul and Jesus, and when he wants to do this, he is always a child. It is so true that it is only the soul and not the body, that, when this happens, I am always either in the vault of the heavens, or wandering through other points of the earth. Sometimes, then, I have said that as I returned to myself, I felt a pain at that place from which baby Jesus had suckled, because in suckling, sometimes he would do it a little strongly, so much so, that it seemed that through that suckling he wanted to pull out my heart from within my breast. Therefore I felt a sensible pain, and as I returned to myself, the soul would communicate it to the body. But then, this happens also in other things, as for example when the Lord transports me outside of myself and lets me share in his crucifixion. Jesus himself lays me on the cross, and pierces my hands and feet through with the nails. I feel such pain that I feel I am dying. Then, when I find myself inside myself, I feel it well in my body, so much so, as to be unable to move my fingers or my arm, and so forth with the other sufferings that the Lord shares with me. To say everything, I would be too long. I also remember that when Jesus would suckle from my breasts, he would place his mouth there. But it is from my heart that I would feel him draw whatever he suckled. So much so, that while he would do this, at times I have felt my heart being torn from my breast, and sometimes, feeling a most vivid pain, I said to him, "My pretty little one, indeed you are too impertinent. Do it more mildly, for it hurts very much." And he would laugh to himself. In the same way, when it is I that suckle from Jesus, it is from his heart that I draw that milk, or blood. So much so that, for me, suckling from the breast of Jesus is the same as drinking from his side. I will add also another thing. Since the Lord every now and then is pleased with pouring a most sweet milk from his mouth, or with letting me drink his most precious blood from his side, then, when he wants to suckle from me, he suckles nothing else but what he himself has given me, because I have nothing with which to sweeten him, but much with which to embitter him. This is so true that, sometimes, in the very act in which he would suckle from me, I would suckle from Jesus, and I would realize clearly that what he was drawing from me was nothing other than what he himself was giving me. It seems I have explained myself enough, as much as I could. June 9, 1899. The very grave sin of abortion. Union of sufferings and of prayers. I spent this morning very anguished because of the many offenses which I saw him receive from men, especially because of certain horrendous dishonesties. How much the loss of souls grieved Jesus! More so, since it was a newborn baby that they were going to kill, without administering holy baptism to him. It seems to me that this sin weighs so much on the scale of divine justice, that it is the one that most cries out for revenge before God. Yet, these sorrowful scenes are renewed so very often. My most sweet Jesus was so afflicted as to arouse pity. Seeing him in such a state, I did not dare to tell him anything, and Jesus just told me, "My daughter, unite your sufferings to mine, your prayers to mine, so that they may be more acceptable before the majesty of God, and may appear not as your things, but as my own works." Then he continued to make himself seen other times, but always in silence. May the Lord be always blessed. June 11, 1899. The light in order to comprehend Luisa. My sweet Jesus continues to make himself seen only very few times, and almost always in silence. I felt my mind all confused and full of fear that I might lose my soul and other things, which it is not necessary to say here. Oh, God, what pain! While I was in this state, he made himself seen for just a little. He seemed to carry a light, and from that light many other little globes of light were coming out. Jesus told me, "Remove every fear from your heart. See, I have brought you this globe of light to place it between you and me, and among those who approach you. For those who approach you with an upright heart and to do good to you, these little globes of light that come out, will penetrate into their minds, will descend into their hearts, will fill them with joy and with celestial graces, and they will comprehend with clarity that which I operate in you. Those, then, who will come with other intentions, will experience the opposite, and will be dazzled and confused by these little globes of light. So I remained more tranquil. May everything be for the glory of God. June 12, 1899. Jesus himself prepares her for communion. This morning, having to receive communion, I was praying good Jesus to come to prepare me himself, before the confessor would come to celebrate Holy Mass. Otherwise, how can I receive you, being so bad and not disposed? While I was doing this, my Jesus was pleased to come, and in the very act of seeing him, it seemed to me that he did nothing but dart through me with his gazes, most pure, and sparkling with light. Who can say what those penetrating gazes operated in me, letting not even the shadow of a little speck escape? It is impossible to say it. Rather, I would have wanted to let all this pass in silence, because the internal operations of grace can hardly be expressed as they are with one's mouth. Rather, it seems that one would counterfeit them. But Lady Obedience does not want it, and when it is for her, one must close one's eyes and surrender without saying anything else, otherwise, woes everywhere. In fact, since she is a lady, by herself she makes herself be respected. Therefore I continue. In the first gaze, I prayed Jesus to purify me, and so it seemed to me that everything that shadowed my soul was shaken off of it. In the second gaze, I prayed him to illuminate me, because, what good comes to a precious stone from being pure, if it is not sparkling so as to capture the gaze of those who look at it? They will look at it, yes, but with an indifferent eye. Much more was I in need of that light, which would not only render my soul resplendent, but would make me understand the great action I was about to do, since I was not only to be looked at, but identified with my sweet Jesus. Therefore, it was not enough for me to be purged, but also illuminated. So, in that gaze Jesus seemed to penetrate through me, just as the light of the sun penetrates through crystal. After this, seeing that Jesus continued to look at me, I said to him, "Most loving Jesus, since you were pleased first to purge me, and then to illuminate me, be so kind now as to sanctify me. More so, since I have to receive you, who are the Holy of Holies, and therefore it is not right that I be so different from you." So, always benign toward this miserable one, Jesus leaned toward me, took my soul in his arms, and seemed to retouch it all over with his own hands. Who can say what those touches of those creative hands operated in me? How my passions, at those touches, put themselves in their place. My desires, inclinations, affections, heartbeats and my other senses, sanctified by those divine touches, changed into something wholly other, and, united among themselves, no longer clashing as before, formed a sweet harmony for the hearing of my dear